And so that's what I encourage all of my team to think about is don't see this tool, don't see this technology as a threat, but see it as a really empowering theme, which is you have to change your role because the game has changed.
I think it's really fun to see if in this new era the same business principles hold true, or if now there's a new advantage to just speed, like speed of execution, speed of adaptability becomes the core power for every business. Maybe that's something we can talk about in the both context of Walmart and your role.
I love it. Speed is definitely top of mind for us. I know it's top of mind for everybody right now. I want to bundle on top of what you said earlier around V0, Replit, and some of those other prototyping tools. We've been using them a lot lately, and it's been an absolute game changer. I mean, we're looking at design and development, discovery and design timelines that used to take months, if not quarters, just to get early feedback from associates. And what V0 can do now in literally 2 or 3 minutes blows me away. And the fact that you can actually upload a Figma and have your design system there to make it rendered in real time in your design system, I feel like we're just scratching the surface in the realm of possible. And I tell my team all the time, the game has changed. For folks that get stuck in the old ways of product management and get precious about the craft and precious about the long form product requirements documents of old, those things have changed. And so it's up to associates and employees to figure out what is the new way of working, what's the new operating model, and where does design strategically add differentiated value in an ecosystem like Walmart with those tools now in everybody's hand. So I think it's an incredibly exciting time to be in product and design because honestly, we're disrupting ourselves just as much as the market's being disrupted more broadly.
Yeah. Well, this is a really hot place to start. So why don't we roll with it? I mean, there's been a lot of conversation about the collapsing potentially of the traditional roles of PM, design, engineering, and potentially, kind of putting more value on, unicorn product thinkers, whether they're engineers, whether they're PMs formally in their job function, but just whoever can go and prototype all of those different parts of a product concept, like that's really what's valuable, right? And especially now that like the skill set required to go and get to that final, or at least a prototype of what the customer is going to see is so much easier, right? I remember like when I was working before even Airtable, one of the things that I could uniquely do, and when I went to Salesforce, for a stint, one of my superpowers was the fact that I could very rapidly go and prototype. I could go and build like an interactive functional prototype with code, but think through the design, think through the product requirements all in one, right? Versus having to like go through all these different intermediate phases. And, the punchline is like, is there kind of a new skill set required and, or does that affect, how we think about the different roles of traditionally EP and D in EPD?
100%. I think if you look at where we were in the 1990s with waterfall development, where you had to finish one phase of development, you moved to the next phase. The problem with waterfall was by the time you moved to the next phase, your first phase was obsolete. All the requirements no longer held true. And so in 2001, you had a group of 17 software engineers that went to a small ski town in Utah. And so there's got to be a better way. Yeah, and from that, they created the Agile Manifesto that we all know today and that a lot of large enterprises have adopted. And the reality was when Agile hit the scene, what was the feedback? It was, this is chaos, Howie. This is something that would never scale to large enterprise and will never work because it's uncontrolled. And yet the people that adapted to that Agile way of working, what we found is those teams were able to deliver more impact. They could move with more speed. And ultimately, they held a lot more power because they were able to drive outcomes a lot more quickly rather than focusing on process for process sake.
Yeah.
And so what happens in a world where, to your point, in Agile, you had these empowered cross-functional teams. What happens in this new world where now we have empowered cross-functional individual contributors that can span the full development lifecycle, that can cut across traditional roles, that can do strategy, they can write product requirements, they can do designs, and they can also write front-end code all by themselves? How does that change the game? And so I think that is one of the most strategic questions that every company should be thinking about right now is when you democratize this, how does it change your talent acquisition strategy? Who are you bringing in today that has deep expertise that is now a commodity with everybody having generative AI? And if expertise is now a commodity, what type of talent should we be bringing in? It's that high agency talent. It's folks that can operate highly autonomously, that see a massive wall in front of them and they go and bust through that wall to go and drive an outcome.
Yeah.
People that can maniacally focus on making sure they're passionate about what's important and not getting bogged down in the process or other type of documentation that doesn't really add strategic value. And so that's what I encourage all of my team to think about is don't see this tool, don't see this technology as a threat, but see it as a really empowering theme, which is you have to change your role because the game has changed. And if you don't adapt with it, ultimately you'll be obsolete. But that should be a theme of empowerment. Go and learn these tools, put them in your hands, see how you can disrupt yourself. And so my hope of every product manager, every designer, every professional out there is they are fully embracing this technology, playing with it on a daily basis and figuring out how they can 10x themselves in their role.
Yeah. I mean, that's an awesome message. And I think, there's so much energy around it too, right? This is a very exciting moment. To me, it kind of almost goes back to the question of like, why does any role, why does any function, why does any company exist, right? And I think it goes back to like Drucker, like management 101, like the company exists to deliver value to the customer, right? And every role in the company exists to help support the creation of new value that can be delivered to the customer. And I think along the way, especially as companies get larger or, more bureaucratic, I think it's very easy to get, obsessed over all the intermediate things that are done that don't actually create customer value in and of themselves. But, like somebody's role becomes like the intermediate thing, right? And I think what you're saying, what I hear is, this is really a moment where we can actually collapse a lot of those, extra, phases that traditionally were required to ship value to the customer. Now, especially in product, the boundary between you and creating value for the customer gets much reduced. I mean, it's almost like going back to like startup land where, the very essence of a great startup is like nothing matters except creating value for the customer, right? Creating product market fit. Like nobody cares if you built like internal documentation, if you did like, your taxes and your payroll really well. I mean, you should do those things well, but like it will not matter. You will not have a business if you don't ship great value. And so what are the ways, so I think there's both an upskilling and a talent acquisition part of this problem, right? And so what have you done to actually help your existing teams learn how to gain fluency here beyond saying this is really important? And obviously like, that goes a long way, but what specific, learning techniques or are there ways that you've actually brought that into your design process, into how you work with your teams?
Love it. Yeah, we have a maturity framework that we created in people product well before GenAI hit the scene, but it was called the 5 P's of product.
Okay.
And it's people, product, process, performance, and partnership. And we believe those 5 core dimensions dictate whether or not you're a strong product manager. But what I'd say is when we first created that framework around people, how do you uplift and up-level the people around you? Product, how do you make sure you're shipping world-class product that's actually driving outcomes? Which leads me to the third one, which is performance. How is your product performing in the marketplace? Are you actually driving intended behaviors and solving core pain points? Process was a core focus of ours. And a large organization like Walmart, process is important and you can't just leave it by the wayside. Unfortunately, we do have more constraints. We do have more considerations than a startup environment. So understanding how to navigate politically is a very important differentiation of great product talent here. And the 5th dimension is partnership. And partnership continues, and I think will continue to be a differentiated value for the best folks in organizations is who can build strong camaraderie, build strong partnership, and who can navigate really complex organizational dynamics. Who is a great, effective communicator that can convey ideas, that can tell inspirational stories, and really get folks around them to rally behind a cause, because everything else becomes a commodity and becomes cheap. And so it's really about relationships. It's about navigating those organizational dynamics. It's about storytelling and vision casting and making sure you understand the people you're building for and really understanding the outcome you're trying to drive. So what are we doing within people, product, and design? The first thing we're doing is promoting broad daily active usage of these GenAI tools. And so every all hands meeting, every session where I'm sitting down with one of my product leaders to sit through what we call our executive product reviews, we're asking, hey, how did you leverage these GenAI tools? Did you use V0 for a prototype and then take that to a store or to a Sam's Club or to someone in a data science role to go and test this out first? And if the answer is no, we're trying to, in the moment, address that culturally, which is not only should you be scared of these tools, not be scared of these tools, you should be embracing them. And it really is going back to the earlier point of like culture eats strategy. Nothing has ever been truer in this moment. If leaders aren't role modeling great behavior, if I'm not on the forefront encouraging this use and in my all hands meeting, showing how I'm personally using it, people naturally may have a fear. And they may automatically have this kind of protectionism mindset, which is, this is doing what I used to do. And this is potentially removing my secret sauce from what I had as differentiated value in the marketplace. And so culture is where we're really trying to make sure that people understand this is a differentiator in terms of you being able to be empowered to deliver great results to the customer, to the member, to the associate, rather than seeing it as a threat.
Yeah. I think it's so powerful too when leaders literally do the thing, right? You're not just talking about it, saying how important it is. If you're going and actually using these products yourself and bringing the outputs and saying, I've literally just spent a weekend or, the past week working on this prototype, here it is. That's so much more powerful. I think there's something like very, subconscious about, our tendency to look at, other people, especially leaders, and literally mirror what they do. So I think it's a powerful example of literally leaders walking the walk, making a huge impact. And I think this is a good segue as well to kind of describe a little bit about your remit and also just kind of level set the scale at which Walmart operates, right? And so you lead the product org that builds products for actually a over 1 million person user base, which happens to be the store associates of Walmart, right? And so it's a huge kind of important footprint. This is like literally the entire user base of many consumer products, right? And like you have, that much of an audience, just within the employee base of Walmart. And so describe a little bit more about what that remit entails. What are the bigger, kind of priorities, especially this year, that you're looking to drive? Like, what's the before and to that you're trying to get to with this product?
I'll start by saying I think I have one of the coolest jobs in the world. So I don't want to correct the number, but we actually have 2.1 million associates.
Oh, wow. Even better, yeah.
we do call employees here, and so we have about 1.4 million associates that are in Walmart U.S. stores, over 100,000 associates that are in Sam's Club, about 60,000 associates in our corporate roles, and then we have a lot of folks in international markets, and we serve 19 countries in totality. And with my role, we have the great fortune of building experiences that cut across all of those segments. So a segment might be our Sam's Club, Walmart U.S. stores, global tech and corporate functions, and then our international markets. And so when we build an experience, whether that experience be mobile clocking, where our associates, when they enter the perimeter of the store, they can simply clock in for the day rather than having to walk to a back room. Now, that may sound like a very simple feature, but when you have the scale of Walmart, where you have an associate population of 1.4 million associates in stores, the cost savings and the time savings of not making that associate who enters the lawn and garden section at the front of the store, having to walk all the way back to the back of the store to swipe a physical badge to clock in for the day, you project that out by the 350 associates that are in that store, and you multiply that by 4,500 plus stores in the US, the impact is massive. And so we look for those opportunities to reduce friction from the associate experience, and we look at doing that at scale. And I'll give you one more example. Managers today, they have to manage millions of time off requests on a monthly basis. And today, to do that, those managers have to come off the floor where they should be serving other associates or serving our customers. They have to go to a dark back room, go to a desktop computer. They pull up an antiquated experience that looks like it was built maybe 15, 20 years ago. And they've got to navigate a complex organizational hierarchy to go and approve those time off requests. Well, we just are in the process of launching a new experience where in the palm of their hand, in a matter of seconds, while they're on the floor serving those customers or associates, they can pull it up, they can review the requests, they can accept and reject there. And again, when you have 2 million of those coming in every single month, that's 24 million a year. That's 24 million times a manager doesn't have to get off the floor doing their job. They can simply be on the floor and do it in real time. And so we power things from mobile clocking, time off requests, learning experiences. We manage all of our career mobility. So as you think about those hourly associates that work their way up, like our global CEO, Doug McMillan, to now be CEO of Walmart Inc., we power those experiences to make sure people have the right visibility to the right roles, the right time. We look at upskilling. How do we use learning and development to ensure they're empowered to do their best work here at Walmart? And then we also own everything in the pay and benefits in space. So how do we make sure that our associates understand the full value proposition of what it means to be an employee at Walmart, where historically they might have looked at their hourly wage and said, well, I can just go walk down the street and get $2 more an hour at the other local restaurant or retailer. We want to make sure we're owning the mic and making sure they're aware that we offer fully paid college education, that we offer really generous 401k match, that we also have our associate stock purchase plan to ensure we're building a culture where people feel empowered to be an owner here at Walmart. And so our team owns a lot of those experiences. And in terms of the before and after, when I first got here, I came from the e-commerce product world where everything was incredibly simple, right? You have to ship an experience, whether it's the homepage of Walmart.com or it's the shopping cart and checkout. You don't get to ship those new features with an instruction manual.
Right.
And yet when I got here, every time we launched a new experience to associates, it felt like we were shipping it with a 15-page PDF with a detailed walkthrough of screenshots of how to accomplish a task. And so we had this maniacal focus that said, if our customers have that experience and our associates are serving those customers, they deserve just as good of an experience as our customers do. And so how do we reduce the complexity? How do we kill the friction in their daily flow of work? And how do we bring the same consumer grade principles of bringing delight to their day that our customers can expect when they shop on Walmart.com? And so we moved from 280 disparate systems that we had to power our people experiences. And we've been on a journey to move those into one consumer grade single app experience that they can use on the floor while they're serving customers and members.
That's awesome. I'm sure, first off, there's a huge surface area of areas that you can invest into, right? I mean, if you're replacing 280 plus different systems, there's so many different capabilities and features. I mean, you referenced a few. How do you prioritize across those? And maybe the corollary to that is, are there certain outcome metrics that you really care about, right? So time saved obviously is probably one, it sounds like, maybe things that will help drive employee retention, et cetera. But how do you think about the heuristic that you use to prioritize what I'm sure is a potentially infinite list of what you could work on?
We've tried a lot of different prioritization frameworks in my tenure here, Howie. I mean, if you have a great one, I'm always open to new ones. Starting with a simple RICE framework: reach, impact, confidence, effort. We've probably tried every product prioritization matrix that exists on the planet. But what I'd say is what you'll find is that your associates, your employees, your customers typically have the best ideas.
Okay.
And if you want the best prioritization framework, is go and visit stores, go and visit Sam's Clubs, go and visit and talk to corporate associates. And 9 times out of 10, the same themes will start to bubble up. And so I think it really places emphasis on the importance of understanding our user, of making sure you truly have strong empathy with understanding their core pain points. And then obviously we have an access to a large data set. And so we get to understand engagement data. We get to see where drop-offs happening. We get to understand where we're actually seeing productivity savings. And we do measure those things. But for the most part, I'd say the best way is just getting out to the field, observing people doing their work, identifying where those friction points are, and then being maniacally focused on solving those problems.
I think that's such a powerful point. And what I've seen personally is a lot of companies, especially in the tech world, where there's a lot more leaning in by the executive teams, by the product teams, to actually spend time with real customers, right? I think there was a period where, maybe during hyperscale and ZERP, it was very easy to allow yourself to get disintermediated from all of those things. And, I think now there's been this huge kind of refocus on, hey, let's make sure that we're actually shipping great value to the customers. You look at some of the great, breakthrough products or businesses of today, and, they're often run by people who are literally, like Elon going to the factory floor, right, of Tesla and seeing the actual products they're making and seeing how they're being made, right, and opportunities for improvements. What are the ways in which you actually operationalize that, right? So is it, something that you make a practice, like you have your actual product team go in and do a tour of actual stores? I mean, thankfully, Walmart is a pretty prevalent, presence across, globally, but also especially across the U.S. And so it's probably not hard to go and have every, person in product go and visit a local store somewhere. But how do you actually make that a habit?
I love it. I think first thing is, as an avid customer at Walmart, I'll give you an example. I went to our eye care center because my 4th son, he got glasses recently. Okay. And so I sat down with the optometrist, and she had mentioned that she was having issues with one of the experiences that our team had. And you could just tell the visible frustration we had. And so I think that the
your
first
role?
She did find out my role. Okay. And the first thing we did was make sure that we had a product manager out there first thing in the morning to sit down with her, understand the pain point, and make sure that we were really timely in addressing her feedback. So I think there's a lot of natural opportunities that are pretty organic when you work at a place like Walmart, because we happen to shop and are in Walmart and Sam's Club all the time. But also in the cases where, if we have folks that are in a different market, this has to be more intentional. We're going to do a trip with some of my leadership team to Oklahoma City in a few weeks here to go and sit down and go and visit some Sam's Clubs. And we have a lot of intentionality there of what are some of the new things in our roadmap that we need to get real feedback on. And how do we take some of those prototypes that we talked about earlier on this call? How do we take those prototypes to get early feedback to inform the design direction, rather than going just to validate final releases and work through final testing? How do we actually get their feedback integrated early and often? Because I think every time I go to the field, there's a net new context that comes up that I had no idea even existed, or there's a problem that I didn't even know was possible. And so I encourage all my folks to get in the field. We typically say at least once a month, you should be in the stores, testing out your product, making sure that folks are actually seeing what our associates are experiencing on the front line.
Yeah. And I think that anthropological view of the customer, in your case, the user, is so rich, right? With context that you don't necessarily just get with data, or there's even products where you can log, click behavior and see how people are moving around the interface, but you're kind of missing the the immersiveness of seeing what are they doing when they're holding their phone out, right? You can see where the taps are, maybe digitally, but you have no idea where and how physically, the store manager may be navigating their day, right? To your point about having to go back in the back room to approve all the time off requests versus be able to do it one-handed while probably also directing, kind of employees or customers around. And so, I personally think that's a really awesome, practice for you. And I'm curious, what are the types of insights that you're capturing? How physically do you actually go and capture those insights? Is it in the form of raw kind of user research type notes that you then go and percolate into a PRD at some point? Or, is it some other intermediate, kind of artifact like voice notes, et cetera? How do you literally capture your learnings from from those on-sites?
Yeah, typically what we do, we have a field guide that we make sure everyone is prepped with before they actually go out to the field. We obviously can't have folks going and interrupting all of our associates while they're working or serving customers or members.
Lots of shoulder tapping.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got to be intentional with it. But the core directive that I give to everybody that goes and visits the stores is we're there to serve them. We're not there to be an zoo exhibit and just watch and extract all the value for our product portfolio. But if there is an issue that is raised by an associate when we're visiting a store, the expectation is that you take that issue back and you go and solve that issue and reply back to that associate with a reply and a response to what you're going to do to follow up. So that takes many forms and factors. I personally take my iPad and take copious notes on that. And then typically we'll go into each of our respective product portfolios and section out that feedback to address it and make sure that it gets on the appropriate roadmaps.
That's awesome. Go ahead.
No, please.
So before Walmart, you led a digital product practice at Deloitte, right? So you got to go and do this, kind of digital product work for many different organizations. How does first of all, the style at Walmart of really immersing into, in this case, real user problems and then rapidly translating that into action, how does that compare with, kind of other enterprises out there culturally? What is Walmart very good at in terms of product execution? And then where have you seen, either the biggest room for improvement or already improvements made during your time here?
Yeah, one of my largest clients while I was a consultant was actually Walmart and our online grocery space, as well as Walmart.com. And so as a part of that, I think there's a lot of parallels between the customer space and the associate experience space. But what I love most about the associate experience space is a lot of what we build is 0 to 1. And so we're in e-commerce, a lot of it is optimization. How do I improve shopping cart conversion? How do I get more add to cart clicks from the homepage? How do I drive item page impressions to make sure that I get high consideration items added to cart? If what we're building on the associate side, a lot of it we're starting from a blank slate. And we've got all these legacy third-party systems that we've essentially abstracted away. And so we're building these consumer-grade experiences on top, and we have the opportunity to really take a step back and say, this is what the legacy process was.
Yeah.
But that was 27 steps. How do we take that experience that used to take 10, 15, maybe even 25 minutes to complete for a manager? How do we simplify that and make it only 20 seconds? And so it's fundamentally a different muscle than most organizations have to face, we effectively have this massive portfolio of all 0 to 1s. And so every day is what I'd consider like an incredible strategic challenge. There's never an easy day in a very positive way, because we're navigating in gray space every minute of every hour. And a lot of times we're having to make judgment calls that we don't have data to support. In the case of 0 to 1s, a lot of times you're working off of strong hypotheses, working off of user research, working off of being in the field. But oftentimes you don't know if it's actually going to land, if you're going to get adoption or engagement until after you ship. And so we've had that happen a couple of times with Me at Campus, which is our corporate super app for all of our corporate associates. When we first launched that, it was a really slow start. And so
what was that? Me at Campus? Like what
Me
was
at
it?
Campus. And yeah, that's the super app for all of our corporate associates, where they can go in, they can navigate the campus, they can find conference rooms, they can order coffee, order food, they can check their pay, check their benefits, update their 401k, they can complete their corporate learnings, they can access the generative AI tool that we built called My Assistant on the fly. Essentially think ChatGPT, but where they can actually leverage Walmart knowledge, Walmart data, and Walmart actions at their fingertips. And so it's one super app for all corporate associates. When we first launched that, growth was not great. And so we had to take a step back and say, what are the differentiated experiences we need to have in here to drive the right level of growth, adoption, and productivity? And we've since done that. And really proud to say a couple of weeks ago, we reached effectively 95% penetration of our entire corporate workforce. And now every billboard, when you're walking around campus, you'll see a Me at Campus billboard promoting broad use of it. So It's been a journey, but a lot of the 0 to 1s you launch, you don't know what's going to be great. You don't know what users are going to resonate with. And so you're taking shots in the dark sometimes, but that's where a test and learn approach, quick prototyping, getting real feedback in a real-time manner is really important.
Well, I mean, on that particular example, what were some of the unexpected learnings after the first launch, right, where it didn't get that widespread adoption right away? Like, what did you learn, and what did you act on from those learnings?
Yeah, I think the big thing we realized was we had put a lot of cyclical experiences into Me at Campus. So we thought about things like your annual performance eval, or updating your goals, or completing your learnings. What we found was a lot of those are cyclical. And so we'd see a spike during those cycles, and you'd potentially see 60%, 70% adoption. But we also didn't do a great job at first of decommissioning legacy experiences. And so we saw people would still gravitate toward legacy experiences because it's what they'd always used.
Yeah.
And as we started to shut off those, as we started to bring in additional rich capabilities that weren't just cyclical in nature, but truly added value, truly solved the pain point, not to wait in line to order coffee or order food, that's where we saw the real value start to take off.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that's an app that some associates maybe or corporate associates even pull out like every 30 minutes, right? Figuring out where the conference room is, asking the AI question. I mean, it truly is an hourly active usage possible product, right? Versus daily active or monthly active, et cetera. And what strikes me as well is like the design of that product is sort of really about jobs to be done at its heart, right? I don't know if you're a fan of the framework, but it's something that I've thought a lot about, especially in the Airtable context, and also now in the AI context. I think there's a lot of products that start with just consideration of the tech, right, and the features. Like, here's something we built, we need to get it out there. And instead, I think a lot of the best products are really designed by first starting with really an understanding of like, what's the job to be done, right? What is this person trying to accomplish? And it could be, they're late to a meeting. They're trying to figure out where the meeting is, right? And that's the job to be done, not using the previous tool to go and look up the meeting and have to click around the menus, et cetera. And I think, really getting the job to be done right, both identifying it and then distilling it into the most essential form can often be a shortcut to cutting away, to your point, like a lot of these superfluous steps that the previous tool forced you to go through to get that job to be done, complete. And so I'm curious if you have like, one or two like really powerful examples of like the old way of doing it kind of had all these extra steps, right? Maybe it's like the performance review tools and cycle like require you to go through all of this extra effort, but really the core job to be done is actually much simpler and something you can distill, and especially with AI powered experiences, potentially radically, make faster and easier.
I love it. I think you're hitting the nail on the head. The past 2.5 years, the entire market's been obsessed with a technology, which is generative AI, agentic AI, soon to be physical AI. And I think to your point, what we need to continue to remind ourselves is that going back to old principles of transformation, to drive true transformation in any organization, tech is one aspect, but you've got to also think about the people and the process impact. And if you just focus on the tech in a silo, you're not ultimately going to drive true transformation. You're going to modernize, or you're going to potentially automate really bad processes and not actually rethink those processes to say, do we even need that anymore?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the biggest thing is making sure people have a true growth mindset, thinking about what is the leapfrog in this moment, rather than how do I take old roles, old processes, and make them a little bit better. You're going to miss the big opportunity for Gen AI with that thinking. And so I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. In terms of an example we have, I'll give you one just really pertinent example that I experienced personally when I got here. I had to go and change the cost center and the location for one of my associates.
Okay.
Now, if you're new to the HR space, people probably don't just routinely change cost center and change location. And I was in that boat. And so I was sent on this task by one of my HR partners saying, please go and update the cost center location. I went and fumbled through our core HR system. I went and looked at one of those 15-page PDFs that I referenced earlier on how to do that. I ended up getting a series of errors on this page to go and change those two elements. And so I ended up going to a support chat, which had some internal support associates that were going to help me through that. I spent about 15 minutes on that support chat. Finally, it said, we can't answer your question on chat. Please call people services and get a live agent to help talk you through it. After I hopped on a live support call with one of these agents, they were tremendously helpful. But end to end, that process probably took me no less than an hour to complete. And this is my first few weeks in the job. That same process today, if you were to open Me at Campus, if you were to go to the My Team feature within Me at Campus, go and navigate to one of your associates on your team, there's a little actions button. You push actions, you push change cost center, you hit enter, you type in the new cost center, you hit confirm and the effective date, and it's done in less than 20 seconds, Howie.
Amazing.
And so something that took me an hour, fumbling through countless systems, countless knowledge articles, a support chat, a customer service associate service representative on the other end, I can now do in 20 seconds with no friction whatsoever.
Yeah.
And we're trying to do that across the associate experience. Because to your point earlier, when you go to a Walmart store or you go to a Sam's Club, I encourage everybody to go look at what those store managers and club managers are doing. They're navigating massive workforces. They're leading oftentimes 100, 150, $200 million businesses with incredible complexity in operations. The last thing they need is just one more friction point in their day. And so we're on this incredible focused mission to remove that complexity, simplify where we can, and make it a really delightful associate experience.
That's awesome. I mean, it strikes me that one of the most powerful ways to deploy new tech, in this case AI, is to actually reduce friction and take all of the unnecessary complexity out of our experiences. There's a great book called Design of Everyday Things by this guy, Donald Norman. He actually worked on advanced tech at Apple, but the book is all about simple products, right? And how we just have too much complexity in our lives already. And the best thing that tech can do, especially for consumer experiences, is to try to remove some of the unnecessary complexity. Right? It's not fundamentally necessary to wade through 20 menus and go through 80 clicks to do some of these workflows, right? And so the more you can move that away, the more that people can go on and do all of the myriad other things they have going on in their lives and work lives. It's not like this one product experience. It's one, improving time off or figuring out how to change a cost center is the only thing that person needs to get done that day, right? In fact, quite the opposite. Like it's one of it's an aside, right? Versus everything else going on. So I think that's so powerful. This idea of how do we both use great design and maybe modern consumer UX in this case, and maybe in the future more and more Gen AI powered experiences to do away with that complexity instead of potentially add more. Because I think that's one tendency that I think the more tech-oriented or feature-oriented approach can lead to is more, and having more complexity, more options, which ultimately is not actually solving the job to be done.
I love it, Howie. 100% agree. I mean, it's the biggest trap product managers can fall into, and business leaders as well. As you think the full kitchen sink, you take pride in writing that long form product requirements document that has every feature, every capability, and there's a great amount of pride. And I thought through every use case, I thought about everything they could do, and I documented it, and we should go build that. And to your point, oftentimes it's completely unnecessary. And so I think that's what makes a great product manager, a great PM, is removing that friction. And same with design. Design can be a key differentiation here to really push back on product partners. And that's where we see a natural tension is there should be in every meeting where we have design and product, Product should be pushing the needle on capabilities. Design should be saying, how do we simplify? And hopefully you end up meeting in the middle to make sure you can still accomplish the outcome you're hoping for, but in a really simple, delightful way.
Yeah. I want to say one quote, which is, the Mark Twain, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. I think that still applies here where, I think too many teams, especially maybe folks who are, earlier in career, tend to feel like they need to justify their time and like their effort. They're working really hard and they want to show like, hey, look at all this stuff I made, right? And I think it's almost like the more grizzled a product, kind of thinker you are, the more you realize like, yes, you have to go and think through all those requirements and all the capabilities and so on. But then the ultimate, kind of final output is the distilled, like really the pure essence of here's absolutely what's essential distilled into its most elegant form, right? And I would love to hear more of like how you actually facilitate that collaboration and maybe sometimes healthy tension between engineering, product, and design, in your org to achieve that kind of final outcome.
I think the first thing I'd say is this is where expertise can actually hurt you. Deep experts in a specific functional area, when they're building products, they can rely on the expertise too much. And so this is where, I came into this space where I came from a customer product context. And so when I came into the associate experience realm, it was a beautiful moment because I could challenge all conventional norms. I had none of the expertise or the baggage of coming into a situation where I knew nothing about learning spaces. I knew nothing about talent acquisition. And so I really brought the lens of I'm just another user. And if this is confusing for me, it's going to be confusing for every other leader or every other associate at this great company. And so I think that mentality can really be powerful. It's like almost taking a beginner view to it. And I love to move talent around too, where you take a leader who's not an expert in a space, move them to go lead a new product portfolio for a quarter or two. And what you typically find is they will challenge all conventional norms and come up with very simple, elegant solutions because they don't understand it as rich as others do.
Totally. And you're not locked into all of the current assumptions. Like, I'm sure there's some really, really great people who work on HR software, but there's also a lot of people who probably are really locked in to all of the current complexity and ways of doing things with traditional HR software, right? And so, the fact that you're kind of coming in and like really approaching those jobs to be done with a fresh lens and able to distill them into the most essential form, I think is a key to that unlock.
Do you know who Ethan Mollick is?
I've heard the name. Refresh my memory.
He's a Wharton professor and is big in the generative AI space and is advising a lot of Fortune 500s. But he has a great quote. He talks about HR being the future R&D of companies, of being the function that is going to help define what operating models, what ways of working, and what org design looks like over the next 18, 24, 36 months. And so your earlier question of how are you actually bringing to life how engineering, product, and design are going to change how they work to move with more speed, deliver more simple solutions. We're taking very much a lab and experimentation approach to how we work. And so what we're doing is we're running a controlled experiment right now with one of the products in our portfolio. That's a brand new 0 to 1. And our control group we're going to run it the same way that we've always run it, which is we have a traditional, what we call 4 in the box, where you have a business lead, a product lead, a design lead, and an engineering lead. And we're going to take it through the same product development lifecycle across discovery, design, build, and launch that we do for every one of the other products in our portfolio. The variant A of that experiment, we're going to put 2 supercharged individual contributors, someone with a traditional engineering skill set, someone with more of a traditional creative business / product / design background. But the key with those super individual contributors is they will be promoting daily usage of these generative AI tools, and they're going to break all conventional wisdom. So the goal is that there is no role. There's no engineering lead or product lead or UX lead. It's just you have a mission at hand, you have an outcome you need to drive. And similar to your earlier point around being in that startup environment where you do whatever it takes to drive an outcome, we empower those super individual contributors to go and drive an incredible outcome with speed. And so we're going to host a couple more variants like that to really understand how can we structure our teams differently? How can we operate differently? So we don't have all the answers yet, but what we do have is a big appetite to really push the conventional norm in how we build software.
But it's really powerful. I mean, very few companies, and certainly even fewer at Walmart scale, would be so not only permissive, but in fact encouraging of this kind of like radical experimentation of how you work, right? And I love this idea of like, I mean, it literally sounds like the YC, founder team going and hacking on some problem, right? But doing so with the blessing, within Walmart on some problem. like, first, how quickly do you expect to learn from these experiments, and like when can we do our chapter 2 of this podcast and hear the update? And then second is like, what is it about Walmart that allows it to be so innovative? I mean, like, I will say, having spent a lot of time with Walmart and many other really large companies of similar scale, Walmart's kind of uniquely fast at mobilizing around things like AI, a design-led culture, and really just like thinking about digital product everything, both internally and then, of course, customer facing. Like, what is it that makes Walmart so capable of doing these things quickly?
It's the culture, and it goes back to our founder, Sam Walton. He very much had an experimentation culture and was always challenging conventional norms and trying to push the needle on what's possible.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. Like, it's super inspiring to see some of our senior most executives that have this incredible risk appetite to try new things, to be on the jagged frontier, to make sure that we're pushing what is possible in the marketplace. And we have a leadership team right now that is promoting broad scale usage of GenAI tools to really understand how we can disrupt ourselves before we get disrupted. And so when you have that culture being set at the top, it permeates and trickles down in a really beautiful way, to the point where, we even launched an entire site called ai.walmart.com that encourages our associates to understand red, yellow, green, which tools are safe to use in our environment, which ones should you have caution, and which ones should you not use. But most of them are either green or yellow.
Yeah.
Because we want people to find the ways they can make their jobs more efficient, to where they can find the 10x version of themselves where they're driving the most value, going back to your earlier point, for the customer and the member and serving other associates, rather than doing process for process sake. So I'd say it really started with our founder, Sam Walton, who had this incredible appetite for risk taking, for pushing the needle, and for innovating, whether it was the invention of the super center or, it was a multitude of other innovations that he had under his belt. It's permeated the culture to every associate that's on this campus today.
That's awesome. What a great throwback too. I'm sure Sam would be proud to see the tradition living on in the era of AI. I remember actually reading, he was a little bit of a technologist himself, and like at the time, like using the fact that he was an aerial, like a pilot, amateur pilot, to go around and use aerial photography as a way to like actually do assessments of like which stores are doing well, like how many people are in the parking lot, like maybe before the store manager even like reported the numbers. And so to see that same mindset applied today in this era of digital product and AI, et cetera, is really, really powerful. So final question is, right before we jumped on the recorded part of this, we were talking about, some of the best practice training between different parts of Walmart, right? Specifically between different product orgs. You have, the different business units, you have the e-commerce plays, et cetera. And you yourself worked on e-commerce before joining this people org. Like, what are the ways that you're actually facilitating that best practice sharing in how you operate all of the stuff we talked about before across these different orgs?
Yeah, so at Walmart, we have 4 core segments. We have Walmart US stores, we have Sam's Clubs, we have global tech and corporate functions, and we have international markets.
Okay.
And what we found is that as we were building out product organizations across the enterprise, a lot of them were operating in silos, where you would have Tim Simmons in international. He would be doing some incredible work in the product space. He'd be pushing the realm of possible from a GenAI perspective, but that wasn't being leveraged in Sam's Club, which wasn't being leveraged in my organization or in Walmart stores, et cetera. And so about a year ago, we said, there's got to be a better way here. We're all doing great work across the portfolio. How do we share more? How do we make sure that when somebody leverages with Airtable, when they have a new instance of Airtable, we're really pushing the realm of possible from a portfolio ops perspective? How can we make sure that we share those best practices across the rest of the enterprise? And so a year ago, we founded what was called the Product Ops Consortium, where we put together the product operations leaders across every one of the core segments. We set up a collaboration station for them to be able to communicate on a regular basis, to share across what's working, what's not working, to be able to post questions of like, how are you doing this process that may be different than how we're doing it? And it's led to incredible dividends. So now we have Todd Garner, who's the Chief Product Officer of Sam's Club, Tim Simmons, the Chief Product Officer of International. We've got some great representatives from Walmart US stores. In my organization, we sync on a regular basis to really think about what is the future of product. How do we uplift and up-level the craft here and make sure that we're still on the frontier of where product can play in a complex ecosystem like Walmart?
Yeah. And what's awesome is, it sounds like Walmart is such a place where there is a lot of autonomous innovation within each of these business units, right? I mean, each of those groups could be a very, very large Fortune 500 company of its own right. And the fact that there are really smart people working within each of them to kind of figure out their own best practices. And then there's the opportunity to cross pollinate and still act as one company, one team at the end of the day. I think that's a really powerful and kind of unique combination. And so with that, I think that's a good place to wrap. Really, really enjoyed the conversation, Ben. I think I personally, and I'm sure our listeners will be eager to hear the chapter 2 of this conversation, to hear about updates on everything we talked about, and are the YC hacker individuals going to end up doing some very cool things in the execution sprints. But really so enjoyed chatting today and learned a lot, both about how to think about product ops best practices in the modern era, and also honestly being inspired by the work that you've done, the work that Walmart is doing to really move with incredible agility, at massive scale. I mean, one of the largest scales by every metric of any company out there.
I love it, Howie. Thank you so much. I do want to give a quick plug for Airtable too. It has transformed our product ops function across the enterprise. And so we've been leveraging Airtable, and it's provided us a sense of transparency and visibility that we've never had before, where as an organization, we've got to support Sam's Club, Walmart stores, international markets, and to be able to have a single source of truth where we can open read-only access to anybody in the enterprise to see our roadmap, see what we're working on, do a double click to seeing the UX designs or the requirements that we're building. It has been a game changer. So huge thank you to you and the team. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, well, we're honored to support great builders like yourself, and we provide the platform and the technology. I think you're ultimately the one who creates magic with it. So awesome to work with you, and thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you, Howie. I appreciate it.